against his two competitors. If he wins, this will be Kagame's third term, having been in power for 17 years. In studio, I have Professor Oeri Tumbo to help us talk about Rwanda on the elections and to create perspective. Welcome, sir, into studio. And of course, Kagame is going for a third term after the constitution was altered. And it was interesting to note that at the point where they had the referendum to alter the constitution, it was overwhelmingly voted for change so that Paul Kagame remains. But the numbers were a little bit, questionable because it was as high as 98%. Is that possible?
Thank you, Mike. First, it is important to note that Rwanda has got a unique model of democracy, whereby after the ethnic strife that killed so many people, Kagame stepped out of the background, came to the front, and fashioned a very special brand of what you might call guided democracy, whereby people are given options that they are likely to accept, and the ones that are likely to be controversial are left out. Now, Rwanda is unique in one way, that they have a stable country, particularly after the genocide, but it's based on ethnic management of any ethnic differences. They have two tribes. Now, the ones running government are basically the minority, but they are doing the right things. So as a result, people are so tired and frightened by what happened that even if there is a certain element of manipulation, it's been useful to enable people to construct their lives after that devastation in 1994. So one of the things we want to take as a lesson from Rwanda is that here we have 42 tribes. They have two, but they still have conflict.
Right.
All right?
Right.
So these identity politics, ethnic identity politics, is the one that causes all these problems. In other words, whether you have 2 or 20 or 50 or 60, is extremely important to develop a model that manages identity politics, ethnic identity politics. For example, in Rwanda, the cause of the genocide of 1994 was basically a model that was created by the Belgians, whereby you make sure these guys are divided, emphasize as much as possible their differences so that you can exploit them, kupita katikati.
Right.
And it is divide and rule and control. So what happened is that initially they fell for the Belgian model of ethnic identity politics. But after that, don't forget that Kagame was actually serving in NRM of Uganda when as a volunteer. Then it's the lessons he learned from there that enabled him, with the assistance of Museveni, to go back to Kigali. And initially he was the number 2. Then gradually, by rearranging the system, he took over. Now, as much as we may criticize that there may have been manipulation here and there, I've even had people describe it as a police state. The situation was so delicate. I remember going to Kigali. Shortly after that, I went there in around year 2000. You could see that nobody was proud of their country at the time. Everybody was walking with their eyes down because nobody wanted to be associated with what had happened.
Right.
So the lesson they offer us is that we have been down that route before, particularly with regard to politics. It is not the route any of us wants to go down. And because when there is war, really, only the margins of death benefit. Everybody else suffers. So the lessons we're getting from Rwanda is that you cannot have the Western model type of democracy. You have got to customize your own and develop it and entrench it, deepen it, so that it takes root and you're able to practice it. You're not likely to practice it in a manner that everybody will agree, but there's bound to be bumps here and there. But gradually, you deepen and it takes...
and it takes root.
Yes.
All right, now, Kagame has been credited for Rwanda having moved from the time of genocide, which was, of course, still remains in the minds of many as fresh as though it happened yesterday, to a point where Rwanda now stands tall in terms of the development. It is one of the cleanest cities in the world. How do you think Kagame has managed to achieve this? Because obviously a country that is coming from civil war normally is very, very wounded, and development takes a long time. But he seems to have managed that somehow.
First, Rwanda is a small country. You know, the volume of problems is relatively limited.
Correct.
Now, two, he has taken a path that emphasizes discipline, self-management, doing simple things correctly. You know, one of the challenges we have as a country here is that a lot of us talk about big things, talk about grandiose projects, talk about success only in terms of fairly large and conspicuous activities. Look at the cars on Nairobi streets. You will see very, very huge cars because those are considered status symbols. Now, what Kagame took was saying, look, let us start with the simple things. When you get up in the morning, what do? Do you clean yourself? Do you clean your house? Do you clean your neighborhood? All right? When you go to a neighborhood that is not cleaned, what is your reaction? You tell them, please clean this neighborhood. So he started it small by starting from the villages. He formed groups and the equivalent of Nyumba Kumi.
Right.
And then after that, that was escalated. And they got control of their environment. Management is very, you have not seen it cleaner anywhere else except Singapore.
Right.
Right. Two, it required courage. You see, Kagame has another quality that is extremely important. And it's coupled with another one. He has humility and he has courage. Now, so the requirements of Rwanda are not about Kagame. They are about the Rwandans, the Rwandese. So what he did was to develop a model that was designed to service the common person. Those public facilities and utilities that will be able to empower the ordinary person so that you have what you call the feel-good effect.
Right.
And you notice there are not many, but they're very proud of their country.
Absolutely.
Extremely proud. And the reason is very simple. The feel-good factor, coupled with self-esteem, has enabled them to be compared and to be called sometimes the Switzerland of Africa.
Right.
Now, that means, as a model for our country, there is a need for us to begin observing two things: discipline, self-esteem, self-management. In our country, one of the major challenges is self-management. A lot of us, particularly people in public position, think they're doing the public a favor to be in those positions, such that they're expecting accolades for just having been elected. Classically, for example, the word muheshimiwa is interpreted appropriately in Rwanda. You don't call anybody who steals public assets muheshimiwa. You don't call anybody who is involved in fraud muheshimiwa. You know, they are encouraged that if somebody, whatever their status, is involved in violating the public spirit of protection of public assets,
They no longer qualified to be a muheshimiwa.
But in our country, it is like it's a God-given title. Even the person who has walked away with basically the whole of your land and left you on the street, you still, when you go to talk to him, you still bow to him and say, Mheshimiwa. These are some of the small things that we need to develop. For example, if you listen to our politicians, they talk to each other in a rather disrespectful manner.
Correct.
In Rwanda, that is out of the question. When you use foul language, you are considered badly brought up.
They still have some cultural values that they esteem.
And there is an element in that they have, the way they do it is anchored on their traditions. Now, in our case, we behave as if every community has no traditions, and yet there are very deeply embedded traditions for good conduct,
respect,
for respect for senior members of the community, the people who have challenges, disabled and things like that. But in our community, these are to me, the elements that we need to revisit in order to enrich our political landscape.
Okay. Now, one of the things that Kagame has managed to achieve is, I don't know, well, we could view it differently, but is unity amongst the Tutsi and the Hutu, which obviously was a bone of contention during the genocide. And he has done that with being firm, although he has been accused by some of being a dictator. What are your thoughts? Is it that there's an element of being strong-willed that is required for you to actually govern a country that previously had been in civil war?
One of the major challenges of the genocide, that facilitated the genocide of 1994-95, was exclusion. You know, throughout their history, they have had the challenge that if one group is running government, they control the administration, they control the military, they control the education, they control diplomatic service, and so forth. So the rest felt extremely excluded. Now, what he's been able to do, he hasn't quite successfully handled that one to the extent that the people in the other side feel satisfied that he's done a good job. But if you look at what he has done vis-a-vis what was on the ground, he has succeeded in promoting a certain element of inclusion, right? They have moved away from comprehensive exclusion that was there earlier on. Now, on this one, the numbers are rather lopsided. The ruling class are relatively few. They are almost 20%. And the ones who are not ruling are about 80%. Now, that is where the risk is, all right? The risk is quite large. So what he has done is to attempt to bring, for example, the Hutus into government, but with the requirement that you comply with the certain rules and regulations and certain values, all right? Now, this has looked like window dressing, and it's still quite a challenge. When you go to many offices, this is quite a challenge. And in my opinion, he has indicated that this is likely to be his last term. My view is that this is something he must work on, because in his absence, what he has done is that he has handled the element of justice fairly well, but he hasn't handled equity that well.
Okay, and one of the questions that we're going to be having the ambassador for Rwanda to Kenya later on, but from your observation, and this seems to be a problem or a challenge that we have in Africa, there is normally no clear succession plan. To a point where the Rwandan constitution was changed to accommodate him coming in for a third term. But this should be the time that he would have been grooming the next leader.
True. You know, one of the challenges of political life is that many of the strong leaders, all right, generally have a tendency not to appoint
or to groom
successors because of the fact that you know, power is a very strange animal. You know, once it goes into one's head, there is an element of indispensability. There is an element of infallibility, whereby people begin to think that as long as I'm in power and I'm well, all is well. But he has indicated recently that they should begin thinking of the people that are in the system with him, who looks like he would maintain and sustain the practices that are in place in order to safeguard Rwandans against conflicts like those experienced in the past. Secondly, there seems to be a group around him that is jostling to succeed him. But in my opinion, none of them has come up significantly in an outstanding manner so they can say that
This
one.
is the man.
This is the man.
Or the woman.
Or whatever it is. But I believe that in the next 7 years, somebody is likely to emerge. The question is whether he will be as acceptable as Kagame.
As Kagame. And we only have 2 opposition leaders who are running against him in the current election, which is going to be taking place today. Maybe it has already started. We'll be raising our reporter there to find out. But your thoughts on the fact that it is almost a foregone assumption that Kagame is going to win, and overwhelmingly?
It is an election, but it's not a democratic election. It is a process engineered in such a way that you can sustain the status quo. It is given a semblance of democracy, but really you could say they are flower girls. Even Kagame himself does not even refer to them. I've seen some clips of his campaign meetings. He does not behave like he has opposition from anywhere. It is simply, in my opinion, what do you call it? A dry run. It's a dry run that is also a real run. And the truth is, that is one of the issues that he must deal with. Because if people are letting him get away with it in the current arrangement, are they likely to let his successor get away with the same arrangement? My suspicion is that it's very unlikely. As you will remember, in a lot of African countries, once a strong leader steps out of the stage, there is usually a very, very strong struggle to succeed him. I have a sneaking feeling, I don't know why, but I have a sneaking feeling that even when Kagame steps out of power in the next 7 years, he's likely to remain in the background because he's in the military.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
He's likely to remain in the background saying, look, guys, cool it, cool it.
Okay. As we wind up, your closing comments, but together with your closing comments, the impact that Rwanda is likely to have on Kenya assuming Kagame becomes president. The relationship that we have had so far, is that likely to carry on? Yes.
You know, Kagame and Uhuru Kenyatta get along very well. And in my opinion, the political relationship, the diplomatic relationship is very good. The business relationship is very good. Their participation in the East African community activities is also congenial. So in my opinion, relatively little will change, particularly if Uhuru Kenyatta retains his seat. Also, I don't see a significant shift because there are no real areas of conflict. One of the important areas of relationship between Rwanda and Kenya is the Mombasa port.
Right.
Now, it's such a lifeline for Kigali that they have an obligation to
keep the relationship
running.
Right.
So at a political level, at an economic level, at a socio-cultural level, I don't think anything will change. In my view, I expect the level of engagement to grow.
All right. Thank you, Professor. We'll have to wind up there because of time. Thank you for joining us this morning. And that's Professor Oeri Tumbo, basically just giving us a scope and a look at Rwanda as Rwanda goes to elect their next president today. And of course, we'll still keep tabs on that. Later on, we're going to be having the ambassador for Rwanda to Kenya coming into studio. And basically, we'll be looking at the relationship that Rwanda has with Kenya and whether that's going to continue. And well, we're taking a short break right now, right here on Kivumbi 2017. But do stay with us. We will be right back with more stories making headlines. Then later on, we'll also be having discussions right here regarding our elections, which is only 3 days to go. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.